Hi, Brenton Ford here. Welcome to the Effortless Swimming YouTube channel. This is our second edition of Feedback Friday, where every Friday we bring you an analysis of someone's stroke to help you better understand what we're trying to achieve in freestyle to swim faster. And this is something that we do at our freestyle clinics, and this is something we're also providing now our membership. And today's edition is someone who we recently had on our podcast. Her name's Tabitha Jones. And if you listen to the podcast, you would have heard that she's taken over 20 seconds off per 100 for her half Ironman distance swim, which is 1.9K. So that's over 5 minutes off in her 1.9 kilometer swim time. And what we have here is the very first video that she did with us. She came to one of our clinics. And then we've also got a very recent video. So these were about 9 months apart. And you can see in the videos once we go through them, there's some very noticeable differences and some very noticeable differences that have allowed her to take off 20 seconds. And you can still see there's a few things that we're going to work on to try and get her down to sort of 130, 125 over the next 12 to 24 months. She's gone from just over 2 minutes per 100 down to around 140 per 100. So there's still definitely some room for improvement, but within the space of 8 to 9 months, some very good improvements. So the three things that I find are probably the biggest ones here. Number one is her catch. You can see in the first video, as she's entering and extending forward, the fingertips, the hands, the wrists, they all stay very high as she's extending out in front. What we like to try and get to is the position where her fingers are slightly lower than the wrist is slightly lower than the elbow as you're entering and extending forward. This allows you to start the catch. This allows you to start pressing back on the water a little bit sooner as opposed to pressing down on the water or putting the brakes on when those fingertips come up. And so this is probably one of the biggest things that have helped her take off those 20 seconds, because when someone comes to us and they're doing this, it's slowing them down so much. And when we go through some of the drills, like some of the sculling drills, some of the kicking drills, we get them to practice doing the right thing and the wrong thing. And the right thing is fingers below wrist, wrist below elbow. And they find out when they go through some of these drills in the wrong position, there's so much drag, so much resistance created out in front. So if we can just get you to enter and extend in that position there with that nice long line out in front, where you should feel the water coming just over the top of your fingertips when you're extending out in front there. That sets you up so much better for the rest of the stroke. So that's probably one of the most noticeable differences. You'll see from the front position as well, that's allowed her to get a slightly better angle in the catch. So when we look from the front, as she's pulling through past her shoulder, we want to get to the angle where it's around 100 to 120 degrees with the arm angle. From if we take the angle from the shoulder to the elbow to the hand, that should be 100 to 120. You can see not quite there yet, but much better than what it was originally, where the arm was quite straight. So that as well is a very obvious difference there. The other thing you can see with her right hand as she's finishing off the back of the pull, she's finishing a long way from her hip in the initial video, and now she's finishing much closer to the hip, which is what we want. If you finish out too wide from the hip, it's a much weaker position, and it's also not directing you straight forwards. I mean, picture yourself trying to pull yourself out of the pool with that wider position. You haven't got quite as much power as if you were pressing back, almost brushing that hip there. So that's the first one and most obvious one, and probably where the biggest improvement has come from. Second thing is the alignment. So in terms of alignment, we like to look from the top, so the bird's eye view. And here we like to use the analogy of swimming on a set of train tracks. So picture you've got a set of train tracks in line with each ear or your shoulders, and every time you enter and extend forward, you're following those train tracks. It doesn't mean that you pull straight through and follow the train tracks on the pull. It's just when you enter and extend forward. You can see in the original video, she was coming across the head, so quite a bit of crossover, and then sweeping out very wide on both arms. Now on the most recent one, there's still a little bit of that out sweep, the hands drifting out a touch, but no way near as much, especially on that right one, so much better. And left isn't quite as much as before. But that right one is noticeably different, and you can just see through the body as well. There's much less drifting of the hips out to the side and bend and talking through that body. So she's managing to keep her body line much more stable and still, and that nice and stable core and body, that's what gives you the ability to kind of apply pressure in the water, because if your hips and your body is moving side to side, if that's snaking, it's much harder to generate as much propulsion in the catch and pull through. Second thing is the kick. She's got a slightly narrower kick and keeping the legs a little bit straighter in the most recent video. Not a huge difference, but enough to just reduce the amount of drag that she's creating there. So she's able to be a bit more effective with the kick. So they're the 3 key points that we've changed there. Now, this very last video here is after we did a little bit of work at the second clinic, and you can see here one thing we were working on was slightly better alignment still, not throwing that shoulder too far forward. So we don't want to overreach once we're in there. We just want to keep that shoulder back a little bit, kind of close to the side of the face, without throwing it too far out, because that's what can it puts you in that weaker position again, and it can also just cause the hips to push out a little bit. The other thing we were working on was keeping the head dead center. So that's like the steering wheel of the rest of your body. In the other videos, head was moving up and down to the side a little bit too much. So what we aimed to do here was to keep that dead center. Unless you go to breathe, don't move your head side to side. And you can see doing a much better job of it here. So great improvement in 8 to 9 months. And I'm excited to see what we can do in the next 12, 24 months, because improving your swimming isn't going to happen overnight. It takes time. It takes hard work. She's done a lot of training and been very consistent with her swimming. So all of these changes don't come without the hard work and the consistent, regular swimming involved as well.